This story with RFK Jr. So RFK Jr. apparently had an interview on CNN, and there was a statement that was made, and it was the shock heard around the world. And people took that one little soundbite from RFK and they are running with it. It's wild and crazy. But I think he really did shock CNN host Aaron, and I don't think she was expecting him to say what he did. And they're trying to use this statement against RFK. Now, listen, I have criticisms for RFK's campaign, but this statement that he made here that everybody is up in arms about is not one of them. Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here.
You had to have a VP candidate to get on in some of these states, right? So that's part of the reason I know you made this decision when you did. The person you've chosen is Nicole Shanahan. She's a lawyer. She doesn't have government experience. Obviously not a household name. And a lot of people have questioned why you picked her. Liz Smith of the DNC just today says she was picked for one reason and one reason only, the money. And obviously she speaks for the DNC, but Mick Mulvaney, who was OMB director under President Trump, said this.
There's one thing we need to know about her. It's the reason that Kennedy picked her for vice president. She's fabulously wealthy. This is the woman who single-handedly bankrolled his ad during the Super Bowl that cost $4 million. That's why he put her on the ticket, along with the fact that I think everybody else probably turned him down.
Would you have picked her if she didn't have the money?
Yeah. Did you see her speech?
Part of it. But I'm just asking, did you pick?
I don't think anybody who watched that speech would ever say that. She was impressive. She's eloquent. She's authentic. Her life it's the template for the American dream. She started out as a minority kid in Oakland, extraordinary poverty, on food stamps, on welfare. She grew up and attended Stanford. She became a Stanford fellow. She became an entrepreneur. She's a very, very uber successful businesswoman. She has encyclopedic knowledge of AI. She has an encyclopedic knowledge of chronic disease epidemic and how to stop it. She is young and she's a mother. And I wanted, in my candidate, I want three things. One, somebody who was not an insider, because it was the insiders who created this problem. They created the debt crisis. They created the addiction to war. They created the chronic disease epidemic. They created the polarization. I wanted somebody outside who's thinking outside of the box. Our campaign is for young people. We're the only campaign that is looking at this assault on our children, on what is happening to this young generation. So I wanted somebody who is young, who is not, an 80-year-old man.
So that part was kind of funny. He said someone who was not an 80-year-old man. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously he's not going to say, well, yes, it helped that she had a lot of money. Obviously, he's not going to say that. He's right. She is young. She can appeal to the younger generation. But again, like Kim Iverson was on the show recently and she talked about this, that she didn't approve of this decision either, because she said it looks like, she basically just bought her way in. And I think a lot of people will see that, but at the same time, I mean, CNN really can't complain about a presidential candidate picking someone who has money, because you guys are always telling us to vote for people who take a lot of corporate donor money anyway. So Aaron really doesn't have room to talk there. That part was funny.
I wanted somebody who's a mother. I wanted somebody who's going to champion their issues. And I don't think anybody who looked at Nicole Shanahan's speech, which I urge people to do, would ever say that the reason that I picked her was for her money. By the way, we don't need her money to get on the ballot in every state. We already have the biggest field operation of any campaign. We are going to have no problem getting on the ballot in every state. We did not need Nicole Shanahan's money, and we're getting plenty of money. We're raising more money, our campaign is, and President Trump or President Biden.
Well, so when you...
So Nicole, girl, Paige and Nicole, you can get that money back. I'm just kidding. He said, we don't need her money.
Talk about, though, that you say that you're pulling equally from both. Now, we'll see what happens. But in the polling that we have, but hold on one second. I'm going to just take Georgia, because we all know Georgia margin of victory last time was 11,779 votes. So the latest polling from Georgia, you get 12% of the Democratic vote. You pull 5% of the Republican vote. Again, these are polls. This is where we are right now, but that's what they show. So when you look at it that way, how can you say that your campaign is not taking more from Biden?
What I would say to you, and I'm not. This isn't something I want to argue with you about. It's just my observation is, and I don't care one way or the other. What my observation is of the Quinnipiac poll, the Harvard-Harris poll, the Gallup poll, the New York Times, Siena poll, all the leading national polls at this point in history as of today show me polling like maybe 2 more points from President Trump than I am from President Biden. So mainly what they're showing, and the Politico did a big article on this, is my supporters are people who aren't going to vote at all, largely, and my donors are people who had given up on the American political process and are re-engaging because they feel that they don't want to choose between the lesser of 2 evils. They want to choose a candidate who is going to inspire them, who's going to give them hope, who has a vision for the future, and who has the vigor and energy to actually change this country. And that, those I want to engage those people in the political process.
Pause for a second. I've heard people say both. I've heard people say that they supported Trump last time, and this time they're supporting RFK. And I've heard people say they supported Biden last time, and this time they're supporting RFK. So I've actually heard both. And I've also heard people say they're going to support RFK just because they don't want to vote for either one of the 2 parties or whatever. But to be fair, I have heard people from both sides say that they are supporting him. But the thing is here is what Erin was basically trying to do with this interview is that she is trying to basically prove to people that if Donald Trump wins in November, it is going to be because of RFK Jr. They're already prepping the press for this. They're already getting the narrative ready. That's why they're having these interviews. Remember, he hasn't been on CNN since I think he first announced. So it's been a while. That's why he's constantly been on Fox News, because they don't want to bring him on CNN. But apparently here he is now. But they're already trying to set the stage for this. I'm telling you guys, they always try to blame someone, right? Just like in 2016, Hillary's can't blame the Bernie Sanders supporters, even though Bernie tried to help Hillary get elected. It's crazy. So I'm already calling it now. If Donald Trump wins in November, they're going to blame RFK Jr. And then they're also going to blame, depending on what happens with Jill Stein, Cornel West, Claudia de la Cruz, they're also going to blame them too. But I think more of the attack will be on RFK Jr. And I think the only reason why they have him on CNN right now, although they've been ignoring him all this time, is because of the person that he picked for VP, because they know that his pick, Nicole Shanahan, who did identify herself as a progressive and has donated to Democrat candidates, actually could really hurt Joe Biden and pull people away from Biden.
Democrats and Republicans, I'm going to take from the margins, and I can't tell you, even today, it's irrelevant, Aaron, because it's really who am I going to take from in November?
So you, in 2000, Ralph Nader obviously was running, and you did an interview with NBC News just a few months before the election. You said this.
There's a political reality here, which is that his candidacy could draw enough votes in certain key states from Al Gore to give the entire election to George W. Bush.
Okay, guys, they went back. They did that moment. They went back there and they got this statement from RFK Jr. against, what's his name? Ralph Nader. Remember when Ralph Nader ran? It was Ralph Nader, Al Gore, and George W. Bush. Yes, I'm sorry, getting my years mixed up. But those 3 that ran against each other, they went back and they pulled this because basically they're going to try to throw this in his face and say, well, aren't you technically the spoiler now? Watch this.
And then you wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. You wrote, Ralph Nader is my friend and hero, but Mr. Nader's candidacy could siphon votes from Al Gore. Mr. Nader dismisses his spoiler role by arguing there is little distinction between the major party candidates and that Mr. Gore is compromised on too many issues. While I admire his high-minded ideals, his suggestion that there is no difference between Mr. Gore and Mr. Bush is irresponsible. A moment ago, you said you essentially see Trump and Biden as the same, different issues. But do you really believe that when people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that is an equal evil to Biden?
Let me pause. So you see what she did there? Notice she brought up how he criticized any third party or independent run during that time, the video footage that they showed you, right? But what she didn't in turn do was say, well, you're basically doing the same thing now. She switched the conversation to democracy. And this is basically the call heard around the world that freaked people out. And several outlets took his statement here and they just kind of ran with it.
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics. President Biden, for the first president in history, to use his power over the Secret Service to deny Secret Service protection to one of his political opponents for political reasons. He's weaponizing the federal agencies. Those are really critical threats to democracy.
Donald Trump, of course, tried to overturn a free and fair election. He tried to overturn one, right? He's still fighting in court.
Yes.
He said, how...
Okay, so Aaron, if anything, basically what you're telling us is they're both just as corrupt. You know, like that doesn't help your case there, Aaron, when she chimes in and says, well, Donald Trump tried to do this after everything that he told you that has happened under Joe Biden's presidency, the censorship of the tech platforms, the Twitter files, everything that was revealed there happening under the Biden administration, also Facebook, the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, all these things that have come out that have happened under Joe Biden's administration. Now, he may not have been the one to pull the trigger, but he also wasn't the one to try to dial it back either. He wasn't the one to tell them to stop doing it. He knew these things were happening. So think about that. So Aaron comes in and says, well, Donald Trump tried to do this. Okay, Aaron, so you're basically proving what I've been saying for quite some time. Both of them are equally corrupt. You know, I don't know where she was going with this.
Is that not a threat to democracy?
Well, I think that is a threat to democracy. If him trying to overthrow the election clearly is a threat to democracy. But the question was, who is a worse threat to democracy? And what I would say is, I'm not going to answer that question, but I can argue that President Biden is, because the First Amendment, Aaron, is the most important. Adams and Hamilton and Madison said, we put the guarantee of freedom of expression in the First Amendment because all of our other constitutional rights depend on it. If you have a government that can silence its opponent, it has license for any atrocity.
So just to be clear, you're saying you could make an argument that President Biden is a worse threat to democracy than Donald Trump. That's what you just said.
But who else has ever tried to send, what president in history has ever tried to censor political opponents? What president has weaponized the federal agency? You know, when my father...
Pause before he gets to his father. You see what she did? So she got the soundbite that she needed. And some people, they actually have, again, I have my criticism of RFK, but if you're going to quote someone, quote them correctly. Some people took that little soundbite and they put it out on Twitter and left all the context out of the discussion. Right? So you don't do that. That's not ethical journalism. So that's what this interview was all about. So then they could take that soundbite, and all of these other news outlets can take that little quote from RFK Jr. there and say, RFK Jr. admits he's trying to help Donald Trump. That would be the headline, right? That they like to spin shit. That's how they get people. Oh, that headline. What? He actually said that? You click on it, you read it, and you're like, oh, he said no context whatsoever.
Came into the Justice Department. The first week he was there, He got all of the branch and division attorneys together, and he said, whatever we do, we are not going to use the power of the Justice Department for political
Trump, of course,
reasons.
has said that he
and
would
what
do
we're
that.
seeing is,
He has said that he would
of course,
do that.
and that is reprehensible.
And he is the only president who's tried to overthrow the results of an election.
Well, you know what? Let me say something about that. I'm not going to defend President Trump on that. That was appalling. And there's many things that President Trump has done that are appalling. But in 2001, we had an election stolen in this country during the Bush-Gore election. In 2004, I wrote an award-winning article for Rolling Stone.
Oh, we can't go into that part. I forgot YouTube's weird about that. But anyway, let me just tell you something here. What he said, that part right there about when she said, well, Donald Trump did this the way that she pushed back on him again. I don't understand, Aaron. Why are you telling him what Donald Trump did? He is not Donald Trump's running mate. He is running against both of them. This is what kills me with these journalists that are interviewing third party and independent candidates. And they're basically saying to them, well, you know, Trump did this and he did that, right? Okay. But as a third party and independent candidate, you're running against Joe Biden and Donald Trump. You're not just running against Joe Biden. I mean, it's basic common sense, But I want to show you something, and then we'll get to his response on News Nation. I want to show you something else, because it's not just Joe Biden. It wasn't just Joe Biden that meddled within the media and censorship. Check this out. Two people in particular I want to point out: Woodrow Wilson and Richard Nixon. President feuds with the media are nothing new. Let's dive into Woodrow. Some of the other ones are a little bit more da-da-da. Woodrow Wilson. All right. Listen to his situation. Woodrow Wilson is perhaps best known for helming the U.S. through the Great War and being an integral part of the peace process, earning him a Nobel Prize for his efforts. What may be less known is that during the U.S. involvement in World War I, Wilson curtailed freedom of the press. He did this through a dual strategy of censorship and propaganda. Woodrow Wilson. So before there was Joe Biden trying to control these social media platforms, back before the day of social media, you had Woodrow Wilson also practicing censorship and propaganda in reference to the press. Interesting, huh? And let's go to Richard Nixon. I think I went to, whoopsie. I don't know what happened there. Let's dive down to Richard Nixon. Let's go to him. Let's see what he did in reference to censorship and the press. Listen to this. Richard Nixon's experience with the press during his campaign against JFK, mainly his perceived loss in their televised 1960 debate, made him acutely aware of the media's power. As a result, he entered office determined to control his media coverage. He created the White House Office of Communications and hired a strategist to help him improve his television appearances. That strategist, future Fox News CEO Roger Ailes. However, not all of this work helped assuage Nixon's fears that the press was against him. Listen to this part here. Driven by paranoia and the embarrassing revelations of his role in the Watergate scandal, Nixon compiled a list of press enemies and had them audited. His surrogates even mounted a campaign to yank the license of a television station owned by the Washington Post, which broke the Watergate scandal and published parts of the Pentagon Papers. What? It's been happening before Joe Biden. RFK Jr. did respond to the pushback that he's receiving since that interview with CNN. Again, I told you Aaron did that as a gotcha moment. He was on News Nation. Listen to his response here.
So the headlines read, Bobby Kennedy thinks Biden bigger threat than Trump. Is that fair? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here is to make the case for himself. I told you to be careful what you wish for. Here's one thing we know for sure. the Biden administration is not giving you security today, not after that interview. Do you want people to believe that you think that President Biden has done more objectionable things vis-a-vis our democracy than former President Trump did in the aftermath of the last election?
No, as you heard, Chris, what I said was that I can make this argument, and I didn't say definitively whether I believed one or the other was more dangerous than democracy. I did say that I don't believe either of them are going to destroy democracy. Both sides are telling us the other guy is the end of the republic, but they're both lame duck presidents. They're going to be in there 4 years. Their political opponents are going to be announced 2 years later. There'll be a new Congress in 2 years later, and we have strong institutions in our country. We have judiciary, we have the press to some extent, we've got Congress, and you have the military. You've got a lot of institutions that are bulwarks against a tyrant coming in and taking over democracy. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're all being told each one is a threat because it's a way of using fear to force us into a binary choice where we're forced into the canal, into this channel that nobody wants to go to, where we either have to vote for the lesser of two evils, and nobody wants to do that. But it keeps them from, it keeps a lot of the public from considering people like me that I have a much higher popularity rating than either of these candidates. So more people would rather see me in office presumably than either of them. But they are not going to vote for me because the media and this whole sort of cartel from both sides is telling them, oh, you have to choose between these two guys. The other guy is so scary. Now, the point I made last night, and the way I'm very grateful, by the way, to Erin Burnett. As you know, CNN has not let me on for a live interview in a decade, and she did that. She was very, very courageous. She gave me a very fair interview. I was really dumbfounded about how fair it was.
Pause. So, and thank you so much for saying this, Notori. Love or hate Donald Trump, he's going to tell you what he think about somebody. Robert is a flip-flopping boop. Yeah, so let's talk about this for just a second. So this is one of the things I have noticed about RFK. I notice he tends to back down. When he's pushed or questioned about something, he tends to back down. He just backed down from this debate with Jill Stein, by the way. I don't know if you guys follow Jill Stein on Twitter, but if you look at her tweets, okay, you look at her tweets, she tells you that they spoke with his campaign and he decided not to engage in having a debate with Jill Stein. I think that is a colossal mistake, by the way. Huge. Now, that being said, and here he is giving credit to Erin for doing the interview with him. This isn't Erin like going out of her way to do this interview. This is Erin doing what she was told to do. Erin is just doing her job. This would not happen if the network execs actually didn't want RFK on there. He would not be on there, just period. So it's not like Erin running things around there. Erin sit at that desk. She fiddled through those little papers. You guys ever notice how like the commentators, they all got their little stack of papers? Look, she got the papers right there. Look, see the little papers that they fiddle through, right? And they fiddle through the papers to make it seem like they did research or something. They didn't research that stuff. All they do is read what is put in front of them. Sage Steele right now has a video trending on Twitter of her saying that the interview that she had with President Joe Biden was scripted. She said it all was scripted. Nothing was what she thought or what she felt or what she believed. This is all an act. So there's no need for you to give kudos to Erin. Erin is just doing what she paid to do. And if it was something that they didn't want to happen, Erin would not be sitting in that seat.
She pushed back on me a lot, and she doesn't agree with me, obviously, on stuff, but she actually let me speak, which was, I'm grateful for. When CNN Digital got it, they cut my quote, so it looked like I was making this definitive statement that Biden was more of a threat to democracy than Trump. And of course, I never said that, but that's a way of making me look crazy to liberals. Here's the point I didn't make, and I think it's a really important point, is that You have one president who allegedly hasn't been convicted, but allegedly was trying to overthrow an election illegally, which of course is horrible for democracy. You had another president who actually has censored speech, and there's courts that have found that he censored speech. And
have you guys noticed he wearing the same outfit? So that going to show you, check this out. He was wearing the same, is that the same suit jacket? Or is that a different suit? It looks like it's the same outfit. Maybe the jacket changed, but the tie looks the same and the shirt looks the same. So it's almost as if he did these interviews the same day. Maybe he did, right? Okay, sorry about that.
Has censored speech, and there's courts that have found that he censored speech and have enjoined him from doing it again. Well, there's actually a court judgment against President Biden, and one of the cases is Biden versus Kennedy, which is my case. The other is Murthy versus Biden, which was just heard, the arguments by the United States Supreme Court. What those cases show is that 37 hours after he took the oath of office, high White House officials were meeting with the social media companies, with YouTube, Facebook, Google, Instagram, and Twitter, and ordering them to censor President Biden's political opponents. And it was on, a lot of it was on health, public health, COVID, et cetera. But also there were other things that were being censored, like criticism of his Ukraine policy, and actually criticism of a kind of a satire of him and Joe Biden. The danger in this is that what the White House was saying, the leverage the White House had, was it was saying, if you don't do that, we're going to bring antitrust cases against you, and we are going to revoke your Section 230 immunity, which is existential for those companies. Section 230 is the section that protects them against defamation suits for publishing defamatory statements by, if you or I put up a defamation against somebody, that person can sue us, but they can't sue YouTube. Oh, they can't exist without that, or they'd have to vet every single post with a lawyer. So it was existential threat, and the social media companies then went ahead and censored us. The way they did it is they provided a portal, and President Biden gave access to that portal to about a dozen agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, CISA, the IRS, NIH, and other agencies, DHS, to censor, to remove people or to remove particular posts. Now, the reason this should be concerning to Democrats as well is once that precedent is established, Joe Biden, everybody, all the Democrats feel he's such a nice guy, he'd never do anything really malicious. But once you establish that precedent, the next president, whoever he is, even President Trump, now has that power at his fingertips. And
it's true. Yeah. And the thing is, and I agree in reference to the censorship of social media. I'm tired of it. I think it's ridiculous. I think it is government overreach. I 100% agree. That being said, though, it felt like in this interview with Chris Cuomo, it felt like RFK backed down a little bit. And he shouldn't, because this is what they're saying about him. OK, they are really saying some crazy stuff over at Morning Joe. And this is why I say RFK Jr. should be going harder than what he's going right now. That's why I said I don't trust that he's anti-establishment. I told you I don't think he's anti-war. How you anti-war and you tweeting give Israel everything, the weapons and everything that it needs? So you're not anti-war, right? So we've talked about this before. So to me, it is very noticeable that I see him just try to back away a little bit anytime he gets pressure. It's not just this example. There have been a number of examples that have happened where he's like, well, what I really meant was, nah, you meant what you said. You meant exactly what you said. Don't cower from that. Stand up and say, yeah, that's what I said and I meant it, damn it. And just keep it as it is. Because this is what they're actually saying they're actually saying, they're trying to relate this to Martin Luther King Jr. They're basically trying to say RFK's candidacy is disgracing Martin Luther King Jr. Listen to this
here on how much has changed and how Donald Trump has worked to reverse so many of the gains made. since Martin Luther King's passing. We showed that extraordinary clip of Bobby Kennedy, and here we are 56 years later, a guy we both know, Bobby Kennedy Jr., running, as basically cover for Donald Trump. It's not a coincidence that some of Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s biggest contributors are Donald Trump's biggest contributors. So here we are all these years later, and just this twisted path has led us to where somebody named Kennedy is putting himself in a position to elect Donald Trump president, a guy whose life now is dedicated to reversing the work of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy.
So a couple of things. First of all, how the hell you spin the web that you just spun to put that together? Look, you can have your criticism of RFK, but to blame him and say that, well, he's basically trying to put someone in office who's trying to get rid of the legacy of MLK. Now you're trying to make this weird connection to MLK that actually is irrelevant. Now, if you're going to criticize RFK in reference to MLK, you can criticize the comment that he made when he said that his father actually, had to do the wiretap on MLK, yada, yada. Criticize him for that shit. But the thing is, look at how far they're willing to go, because they know, according to the polls, he is a threat. Tomorrow night, we're going to go through the map. We're going to go through the electoral map tomorrow night. I'm going to show you what I think is going to happen. It's interactive, so we can play. But I'm going to show you what I think is going to happen, because this is why they're putting these things out against him, especially now he picked the person that he picked for VP. So there's that too. And two, what kills me is for the Morning Joe couple here, okay? Just stop. They kill me like all of a sudden they try to pretend like they care about black people. Stop it. Just stop. Because any other time black people have come on that show and they have tried to make the case for the Democratic Party is not doing things for us, all you've done is try to make them look like a fucking loony bin. So stop it with it. Stop pretending like I care about, the legacy of Dr. King. Just stop. When you leave the studio at night and you go back to your $1 million penthouse, you ain't thinking about no damn MLK. You ain't thinking about his damn legacy. You thinking about the money that you make from that show and how you are living just as comfortable as can be because the connections that you made and the narrative that you spin from the State Department. So don't even get out of here. They kill me. Because if you really cared that much about MLK's legacy, you would actually listen to what black voters are telling you when they come onto your show and they tell you that black voters are tired of the Democratic Party and that, yes, the party is not doing anything for us. You wouldn't sit up there and try to smear them. It's clown shit. They're the white moderate. They're the ones that MLK warned you about. That couple on Morning Joe.